When I think of being Scottish, it's like being part of a big family. And I kind of like that feeling, I like being Scottish.
Edinburgh, 10th of May 2010, start of a new day, a Monday like any other. People go to work and tourists are increasing in the capital of Scotland. They are looking for the tartan skirt, they buy whisky, they have in mind this image of Mel Gibson yelling freedom. But what is Scotland beyond all this? What do the new generations think of it?
I'd probably say they're relatively friendly, depending on where you meet Scottish people. I'd probably say stingy. They don't like to spend money.
Quite patriotic, very, very proud.
Well, they've got a really big reputation, again, of being really warm. But I guess, obviously, films like Braveheart and stuff, everyone thinks every Scotsman walks about in a kilt and stuff.
Music is one of the most iconic signs of Scottish culture. In many pubs around Scotland you can still listen to traditional Celtic instruments and even Gaelic songs. But what else identifies the Scottish culture?
Whisky, haggis, more traditional things in Scotland I guess now. Football. Football's very a big sort of thing in Scotland, and things like ceilidh dancing are still. And I think ceilidh dancing is coming back, especially in the younger generation. I know a lot more people.
Well, it depends. It varies from region to region. In the south, we've not really. I don't think we're really maintaining much Scottish, traditions, apart from wearing the kilt. But I think that's from the Highlands anyway, isn't it? But yeah, definitely. I mean, every year we hold the Highland Games, which is. That dates back hundreds, maybe even thousands of years.
We do draw on the things that we're stereotyped by, but I think people living in Britain in general has lost a lot of its identity, and so I would probably draw on things like ceilidh dancing, kilts, hags, neeps and tatties, but they're not necessarily traditions that I would personally associate Scotland with.
All balls that I go to always have a ceilidh. And kilts, like getting married, we would always want to marry a man in a kilt. And I like the kilt tradition.
What makes Scotland a nation? Because it doesn't have a separate language as the Catalans do or the Quebecois do. There isn't a big religious difference. In Ireland, for example, you could point to issues of religion or culture. Actually, what makes us different is our institutions, so that when I learnt to swim, the little badges I had were Scottish swimming badges. They weren't British swimming badges. I turn on my TV and I watch, BBC Scotland rather than just the BBC. The football team I support plays in the Scottish Premier League, not a British Premier League.
Gaelic language, although present in some radio and television in Scotland, is spoken by only 1% of the population, and there are a few signs of the city that are their two languages.
When I was at school we did Gaelic in first and second year, but didn't go on to take that further.
The census every 10 years, for example, asks people whether they can read, write, speak or understand Gaelic. And less than 100,000 people say they can do at least one of these things, they have some understanding. And only about 60,000 people at the last census said that they could speak Gaelic, so that's getting closer to 1% of the population, a very small percentage.
I have no real understanding, no real grasp of the structure of the language, but I would like to. I think it's our heritage, and that it should be spoken in the schools as it is in Ireland.
They're all old people, which is quite worrying because you want younger people speaking it so it carries on through the generations. But it's all old people that I know.
It's interesting to compare it with somewhere like Wales, which is much more bilingual. There's roughly about 20% of the population in Wales speak Welsh. Everywhere you go you'll see bilingual signs, and also being able to speak Welsh is much more of a social advantage. So for example, if you work in government or the civil service or the media, being bilingual can be quite advantageous, and indeed for some jobs it would be essential.
Some people say that the real rivalry starts in the football and rugby fields. Here the colours of the different nations are felt more than ever. But is there that much rivalry once the matches finish?
Yeah, there's a lot of identity between teams, and again very regional where you're from. this is your team, and you support them and dislike them, and even in cities like Edinburgh, for example, you got Hibs and Hearts, different sides of the cities, big sort of rivalry. So it's a big part of our Scottish culture.
I don't think really there's a big divide. One of my friends thinks with the football thing, she's like, why do Scottish people, if there's a football match, support whoever England are playing rather than England?
It led to the phrase that was used by one nationalist politician. He referred to 90-minute patriots. So it was said that there was a lot of Scottish people who were very passionate about supporting Scottish football and rugby teams, especially against England, and were quite nationalistic in that environment. But actually when it came to voting and their political behaviour, they were much more reluctant to vote, for example, for a nationalist party or to support even Scottish devolution or independence.
Scottish, British, separated by several miles, united by a common state, and different for reasons that for some are anecdotal and for others significant.
Well, I grew up in Scotland, born and raised here. My dad is very Scottish, my mum is very English, and so ever since I was born and just through the processes of life, I've always had such a switch around from thinking that I'm Scottish, thinking that I'm English, thinking that I'm British, and it's always plagued my identity because I've always been unsure of how important it is to start off with, but also how much of who I am. Am I Scottish, am I English?
So a lot of Scots people say they hate the English or whatever, but not really that fussed. I think just exactly the same as us, really. Just 100 miles south, so they're just like same people, same mannerisms as us. So
I don't mind them so much, but when you get into politics, that's when it gets kind of when you discuss politics with an English person, they always think that you're those people up north, and they always feel like you need sorted out somehow. And you can kind of see that with the results in the election recently, where the whole of England voted Conservative and the whole of Scotland voted Labour. And it's almost like they want a change in Scotland when we don't want a change.
Yeah, it's just a matter of history. Let's just forget about history and stop holding grudges and live in the now. You know, yeah, let's just take it for what it is now and take every person as they are, no matter if they're from England or Wales or whatever. You know, that's the way I see it. But I know there's a lot of people out there that just hate England pretty much.
Well, I went to a Scottish state school where everyone was very Scottish, and I sort of stood out as being an English person because of my accent, and I constantly had to defend myself that I was actually Scottish, and was determined to tell everyone that, because there was a sort of negative connotation associated with people who sounded and were English.